Welcome to the Know Your Ship podcast, presented by eHub. I'm your host, Frank Dolce. Well, welcome back. Man, I'm so excited to have our guest here today who is a serial entrepreneur, a recovering entrepreneur,
Yes, sir.
as he calls himself, and currently in a business development role with a local company, has so much experience and insight that he's going to share with us, and a story that I like to call a cautionary tale. I hope that doesn't make you uncomfortable, but I think there's so many lessons to be learned, and your willingness to share your story, we can't thank you enough.
Yeah, thank you
it's
for
amazing.
inviting me on.
This is
really
the
cool
one
of you.
and only Craig Morris.
Thank you.
And Craig, currently serving as the Corner Canyon High School women's head basketball coach, which is, we're right in March. I know it's April, but we're right in March Madness.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you got into, you're a former basketball player yourself.
I am.
Correct? And you played high school where? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in West Valley, so I played at Hunter High School.
Okay.
My folks are still there, so
Is that right?
Yeah, we love West Valley.
Were you a powerhouse in high school?
We were a football high school, and so my stature and build now, I get asked all the time, what position did you play? And they're caught off guard when I'm like,
You're
I
like
played point guard,
linebacker.
shooting guard. They're like, surely you played football, right? And I'm like, I was terrified. I was terrified to play football. We had so many big dudes. I mean, we were sending running backs, linebackers, tight ends to the NFL, right? Out of Hunter High School. And
I'm pretty sure you had a pretty decent, offensive, defensive line contingent come out of Hunter High School. I mean, I think that was a thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a minute.
We did. Yep. And running backs, right? And I mean, we had a lot of NFL players.
Yeah.
So I played basketball. I'm like that, your heart wants what it wants. And from a young age, that's what I wanted. And, we became better at basketball. The year after I graduated, I was on my mission, and all my buddies won the state championship in both basketball and football the year after I left. And I hope that I played a little bit of part in,
you laid
helping
the foundation.
Them prepare. Yeah,
That's
hopefully, right? And,
Absolutely.
And so, definitely a football high school though, and then had a couple good years as a basketball program.
Gotcha. Tell me about your experience growing up. Was it kind of the idyllic childhood? Did you run ravage in the streets and all of that? Did you have brothers and sisters? Tell me about what it was like growing up.
You see now about, hey, how do you know where all the kids are at in the neighborhood? Like, that was my life, right? You'd ride your bike around looking for the house that had all the bikes. That's what we did, right? And I tell my kids this, they think that I'm just like going Uncle Rico or giving them the stories where I'm like, just shovel the walk, like the driveway, so I could shoot the ball. Like, just growing up, I'm like, I love to play, right? So we were active. Like, we didn't have phones that you have now. My kids, all these distractions, right? So we're playing tag across the, all around the neighborhood. We called it jailbreak and had bases and stuff. And kids are hopping fences, and you're playing clear until you hear someone's mom come and yell like, dinner, right? And then we all run home, play dinner or eat dinner, and then come back and play more games, right? That's what we did.
Play till it's dark. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the way to do it. Tell me about your parents. Did your parents work growing up? Like, what was your experience on that? I know you were super athletic, got engaged in all of that stuff early on, but what was your family background?
Yeah, I actually didn't know the word entrepreneur, but my mom is and was then an entrepreneur. Like, she has a beauty salon in the back of their house, a detached garage that's been fully built out to be a salon. So she worked from home, but she worked my whole life. My dad had a couple entrepreneurial endeavors and ended poorly. And so he ended up working for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So he works in the church office building in Salt Lake until post-COVID, and then a lot of them are remote. But and so I grew up with a dad that's working a typical 9 to 5, right? And mom there, and we would come home, we'd check in, and then we called it the shop. We'd go and check in the shop, right? And then figure out, but mom was always around. And then we took sports and or dance, whatever the extracurricular thing was, very, very seriously. My parents worked really hard to provide opportunities. I was in a song and dance group when I was young, trying to, I had no talent in it, so it didn't last long, right? But my parents were all about giving us opportunities, right?
Sure.
My sister tried gymnastics, and she was on all sorts of dance things and played soccer and basketball. And I have 2 little brothers. We all played basketball and soccer. And then I got into tennis in high school, and we just always had support. And my parents encouraged us to do things that you enjoyed, but then also that caused us to be active all the time. We were always engaged in something active.
Well, I'm gonna hit on this theme a little later. I think it's really interesting what you're talking about, and your parents giving you all of this exposure to lots of different activities, whether it's dance, performance, athletics. Your mom's an entrepreneur. Your dad's working hard, trying to provide opportunities for you. I think that's really interesting because I know a little bit about your background and where it ended up. And so I'm just curious how that your upbringing led to your path. So did you find yourself, you go through Hunter High School, you're getting ready to go, you went to college.
I did.
Where'd you go?
A little bit of everywhere. So I played basketball down at Dixie after my mission. Had a little stop before Dixie at UVSC, UVU now, and then I actually I graduated from Utah State up in Logan.
But you didn't play ball at Utah State?
I didn't.
Okay.
I got married at the end of our first season at Dixie. Priorities shifted, and my wife and I, we're like, I'm not going to the league. Like, let's focus on getting an education and figuring out kind of what I'm going to do to be a provider.
Gotcha. And where did you serve your mission?
Taiwan.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
So learn to speak Mandarin, which sort of led to most of what I did entrepreneurially, using the language and sourcing products from China. So it kind of opened up a new pathway.
Yeah, got you. Okay, so when you went into college after your mission, is that what you were thinking? Like, you were thinking, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, or did you have a track that you were headed down?
So I knew I loved sports and loved being around them. I also knew that I wasn't going to play at that high of a level. And so my goal from a young age, I thought, if I'm an athletic trainer, like I could be an athletic trainer for the Jazz or for some MLB team, right? So for me, it was about progress. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to progress as an athlete all the way through that, but I feel like I'm good enough. I can learn, I can, and I can progress professionally in something that I'm really interested in. Like being in sports was the goal.
Right.
And that all changed as I was departing my mission. My mission president actually is the co-founder of, it's now called iFit. It was Icon Health and Fitness. They own Nordic Track and Proform and Leader.
I used to know some guys at Icon.
Up in Logan, right? So
absolutely.
Like, as I'm leaving, and if you're familiar with like the way that a mission works, he's my mission president, right? He's the leader over this group of us that are called to serve in Taiwan. And he challenged me. He said, why don't you go home and just take a business class? He's like, that's fine if you want to be an athletic trainer. That's fine. He's like, do you really want to tape ankles for the rest of your life? That's how he phrased it, right? And at the time, I'm like,
well, that makes it sound terrible.
It does, right?
But what if you're taping Larry Bird's ankle? That's pretty cool.
Right? And so like for me, I'm like, I never thought of anything different. I'm just like, look, I don't want to be a doctor. I'm not going to go to school for 8 or 10 but an athletic trainer, I'm like, maybe 6, right? I can make that work. I can be around sports and like, I'm like, maybe I'll work at the U or BYU or something. Like I never had really aspirations to leave the state, but I'm like, I want to be in sports, right? I got into college. I did what my mission president said, right? I'm like, cool, I'll take a business class. I'm like, wow, this marketing class is pretty entertaining. Like, this is cool.
Right.
I like understanding what makes people buy, right? How do you play into emotion and some of the psychological things, right? And I'm like, I'll take another one. I started taking more business classes. And before the end, I'm like, this is what I want to do. Now, I didn't have I'm going to start a business per se, but I knew I wanted to be in business. I thought, look, like at the end of the day, if I'm trading hours for dollars, that's a challenge, right? There's very little scale in that. And I thought, but if I can be in business in some capacity, then maybe the exchange of value can be such that I'll feel like I'm being compensated for the efforts that I put in, at least how I value myself.
Yeah, absolutely. The founder of eHub is fond of saying dollars follow value.
Yeah.
And so
I love that.
If you are out, don't tell him I said that, because then he'll think it's a compliment. I'm not sure I want to do that on air.
Fair enough.
But anyway, so if you're out creating value, I think that's a fair exchange, right? Yeah. You're out creating value and the dollars follow the value that you're creating. And so I like that because growing up, I grew up in a very similar in an athletic family. And one of the things that we talk about, one of the things we learn in athletics, one of the great lessons is hard work pays off, dedication pays off, sacrifice pays off. And so I think that is analogous to, can be analogous to a business setting.
Totally.
Those lessons that you learn as an athlete and on the field, that's where it transfers over, because you can go and outwork somebody.
Yeah.
You can be more dedicated. You can sacrifice more, and you're going to get the value you're putting in. It's going to come back to you.
Absolutely.
So you get into this now mindset that, well, I want to be in business now. You're gonna leave athletics behind a little bit, and you're gonna go out and make your mark in the world. So after college, now you're married and you have to take care of a family. After college, where does that lead? What does your path look like?
Yeah, so right before I graduated, actually, and I don't know if you're allowed to do this, so maybe I should be careful, but I took out a student loan to buy an existing business. Rates were really good on student loans. I had no student loans up until then. And so I'm like,
I think you can do that.
Yeah, I'm a student, right? I'm like, I don't know. So I take out the student loan, right? And I talked with my wife.
Listen, if it's illegal to do that, because I don't know the answer to that, I mean, I think I have a feeling. Abby's fantastic. She'll take it right out.
Perfect. It's been paid back in full, so it's fine, right? I'm like, it was paid off. But I bought a business, and we bought a business, my wife and I, in the inflatable party business, bounce houses, water slides, right? Yeah. And I had a trailer, and I had a Jeep, and I hired my little brother, and I hired my wife's little brother, and I bought this business that I was like, I don't have to do it. I can just market. Now I know how to market, right? I have this
you have a marketing degree.
Right? I'm like, I can do that. I can get customers, and I'll just send my brother.
They'll run it.
Yeah.
And
it worked like 80% of the time, but like any entrepreneur, right? You always have to be ready to wear all the hats.
Mm-hmm.
That was my first, just small, like learning lesson. And oh my gosh, like it's Saturday and my brother is sick or something comes up. I'm driving clear around the valley, setting up and taking down bounce houses all day long, right? And I'm like, wow, making the money that I make when I have to do the work isn't quite as cool as it is when like my brother finishes the day and I'm like counting the cash and I'm like, I was at home with my wife or my kids, right?
Yeah.
So that was the first little thing
that is such a great lesson. Lesson number 1 in the podcast today. If you're an entrepreneur and you're starting a business, you're just going to wear every hat. That's just how it goes.
Yeah.
There's not many times that you can get around that. So you learned that early on.
But I didn't learn it well enough to avoid.
We're going to get there. I was going to say you learned it, but then you thought, well, I've learned. Now I can start my next.
Yeah, and I'll do it better.
Right.
And I'll set the proper expectations.
Right. Yes.
And I'll build it out so that I don't have to do that.
And that's the end of this story, right? Is that you started the next thing, unbelievably successful, and
I don't have to work anymore, right? I don't have to do anything. I just sit around.
Is that what happened?
No. So that led me, the business was cool. Like it made extra money, but it was seasonal, right? So I still had a job.
Mm-hmm.
So I left Logan. My wife and I wanted to be back. She's from South Jordan. I'm from West Valley. We were like, let's be close enough that we can go to all the things that we want to, far enough away we don't have to go to everything. So we bought a house in Eagle Mountain. Property was really affordable back in 2009. We benefited from the collapse. Sorry for those that were hurt during it, but we were fresh out of college and we could afford a home. Mm-hmm. So we do that. We're running this, and I'm working for Zag in Salt Lake City.
Oh, very nice.
So I got a cool job out of college.
Yeah,
I'm working on sourcing products for them. Right, I'm anything from headphones to most of what they were doing was done domestically with the invisible shield. And then I'm working on like, hey, should we launch like laptop speakers? Like back before there were great speakers on laptops, right? Like,
yes.
But there were opportunities that we were exploring. I lasted about 8 months there. And I'm like, I'm out. Like, I need to go do my own thing. I'm like, I just felt like I was underpaid. Not a shot at them, right? Like as I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm worth so much. Mm-hmm. I'm good at what I do, right? I should be paid more. And that was really what drove me to say, like, I want to be an entrepreneur. Not like this, I didn't grow up aspiring to be it, but I was frustrated with, I'm showing up and like, I felt like I could get my job done in like an hour. And I'm like, we're playing ping pong and we're doing like, I'm just like,
all the other stuff
around. I'm like, water cooler talk was fun for a couple weeks. And then I'm like, look, like for me, this isn't fulfilling. And so I quit with a buddy. We were at Zag. We both quit same time.
Let me ask you this question before, I don't mean to interrupt. You're at Zag, you and your buddy probably feeling the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And did you come up with a concept with your buddy while you were at Zag? Like, I think we can go do this. Or did you both just decide we're better than this? We're out. We're going to go start something else.
You're going to learn the further we get into this that I don't think all of my decisions through. Right? I'm like, I
told you it was a cautionary tale.
Right? And I'm like, I don't like my job anymore. I quit.
And
right?
You're married?
Married, 2 kids at the time.
With 2 kids and a mortgage.
House, yep.
Okay.
Bet. And I'm like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm like, it was, I thought like my bounce house business can maybe give us 6 months runway, maybe. I'm like, so I've got a little bit of time.
You're still doing the bounce house.
Yeah.
And you're at Zag. And now you're just doing the bounce house.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so
gotcha.
I'm like, look, I know it, at the time I didn't think it could be big. It's really funny because my wife and I talk and we're like, if we had kept that business, that maybe could have been big enough that like, that's what we would have done, or it would have opened up doorways, you know. But like, I didn't like it. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't sexy, right? And I'm like, and once I figured out that like there were going to be employee challenges, I'm like, I don't want this. I don't want my weekend to be potentially sucked into doing these.
Yeah.
So I sold that business a few months later. I'm on KSL, the classifieds, looking for other businesses to buy because I had already paid off the student loan for this business I'd bought. And I'm like, wow, maybe I'll just buy businesses. Like I'll buy a business because I can run it, at least at the time I thought really well. I can run it well. I can pay off this loan. Now there's no debt. Now all the money that it's making, even though it wasn't huge sums, I'm like maybe 30 grand in a summer, right? You know, which back in 2010, that was pretty good.
Feels
right?
pretty good.
Yeah. I'm like, I can do this. Talked a couple buddies into buying another business. We bought the old equipment for a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. And I'm like, ooh, nostalgia. I love basketball. 3-on-3, hoop it up, round ball ruckus, right? I'm like, we're going to do this. And both of my buddies and I, we lost all the money we put into it. We could never, like, it just had run its course. 3-on-3, at least the way we were trying to do it out on the blacktop. And, you know, like these portable hoops set up. People are like, I don't know, we want to play indoors and 5-on-5 is cooler. And like, they're just, it flopped, right? So we each lost a pretty sizable amount of money on that. So I'm on KSL looking again. I'm like, okay, 1 for 2, like this would be all right. I have lunch set up with my buddy. We leave Zag together, right? And so we're like, hey, let's just keep in touch. So about every 3 weeks, we're going to lunch. There were a couple others that had left Zag around the same time for other reasons. Some had cool opportunities, but we just kind of get back together like the old Zag crew, right?
Yes.
So we get together and I'm like, oh, actually after this, I'm headed down to Sandy. I'm putting an offer in on buying a clothing boutique that's going out of business. He's like, wait, did you find it on KSL? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, I'm going to see that tomorrow. And I'm like, this is so weird. I'm like, let's go together, right? So anyways, we show up together. We look through all this stuff and we were like, we don't want to run a business. Like we don't want to run like being like a little boutique selling like Laguna Beach jeans. And you may not even remember those, but they were really popular and had like bedazzled stuff all over. These are designer jeans, $300 a pair or whatever. And we're like, but we could probably sell them on eBay. Like we could probably move some of this stuff like in other ways. Let's make an offer. He was in a distressed situation. Like he owed his landlord a bunch of money. Like, you know, just like he's just trying to get out. We completely lowballed him. We offered him $5,000 for all of his inventory. And he's like, if you can get me $5,000 by tomorrow, then I'll do it. So we got him $5,000, bought all of his stuff, moved it into my basement, set up like a little boutique in there. We're taking pictures of everything. And my buddy is putting it on eBay and we're just hustling. Right?
Yeah.
We turned that $5,000 into about $25,000, $30,000. And we were like, we're figuring this out. Right.
Right.
In that we realized though, that like this, there wasn't scale. How many like boutiques were going to go out of business, right? We didn't want to be like going to weekend auctions and buying out storage units and hoping that you got good stuff, right? So we're like, look, we were in the same department at Zag. Like we have a skill set in this product development. He's a really creative, innovative guy. I speak Chinese. I've been sourcing products from China, right?
Man,
and this was
I
the
love
genesis.
where this is headed.
Yeah, and we're like, dude, let's print business cards because that's just what you do, right?
Absolutely.
Print business
cool
cards,
business
get some
cards,
merch, get
right?
a hat with your logo on it,
Absolutely.
right? Like, and we're like, we'll join BNI groups. Corporate alliances no more, but back in the day,
I remember
like,
Corporate Alliance. Absolutely.
And we're going to every breakfast, every lunch, every event we can be at, and we're just slinging business cards. We're like, we can help you get stuff made in China, and we can beat prices. So we're competing with promotional products companies. We're competing with all sorts of random, nothing that made sense. All these little niche, categories. And it took us 10 months to get our first order. And our first order was for $3,000. And we're like, oh, dude, this is not going to work. All the while we had been like cultivating some other opportunities, building samples for people. And at about the 14-month mark, we got a big order. And
You're grinding.
Yeah. And like he's working a job on the side. I'm still running my business, trying to like grow it seasonally, right? We had a couple places that would rent them indoors, like schools or things, but not very much money, right? But we're like, we can make this work. And I'm not sure how it's going to work, but like we can make this work, right? Like we believe. And so we just kept hustling. And we got this big, we had helped a group in Utah County. They were buying trampolines domestically. And we helped them design a trampoline that we made in China for them and save them like 70% of what they were paying.
Nice.
Huge margin increase. And then we helped design a patent for them that the pad allowed the trampoline to be in ground. And then it's a ventilated pad system. So when you jump on it, the air can come up instead of like the pad just slapping down, right? Our first real win, if you will.
Yeah.
And they were consistent. They ordered from us for 5-6 years probably. And I just didn't like the business very much.
Okay. I think I'm feeling a pattern here. Did you, what? Oh yeah, let's do this.
Yeah.
Since you're taking a drink, I'm going to take a drink. Have you ever had this before, the Bucked Up? It's fantastic.
So good. I've been a Monster guy, but
oh,
I like this way better.
You know, 0 sugar. And if you need a little pick-me-up, this is the way to go.
Yeah.
So, are you profitable?
Yes.
With the trampolines and your product sourcing?
We're profitable.
But not where you want to be?
Yeah, not making it, you know, I mean, we're working.
And your buddy's still in it? And is he working another job and doing the product? Okay, and you're still running the bounce house and doing...
By this point, I had sold the bounce house.
Okay.
By the time we did the trampolines, right? So we had started with business cards.
Yeah.
And then I finally offloaded that. I'm like, I'm all in.
Yeah.
I'm all in on this,
Perfect.
right? Let's make this go. And that gave me a little bit of runway because, like I said, 10 months of no cash, nothing coming into the business, right? And then our first order like barely covered its costs. So we were like 14 months of no money. And so me selling the bounce house business, like, you know, was able to make ends meet for a little while, extend that runway just a little bit, right?
Yeah. So, but you got to a point. Now, this has happened... It feels like this has happened a couple times now. You got to a point where you're just like, I don't like this.
Yeah.
This doesn't align.
Hindsight's 2020. Now I'm learning I'm the problem. At the time, I'm like, there's a problem with this business.
No.
Like, this is...
So that's exactly where, I mean, I think that's what we're talking about is you go through this thing, you start to get maybe you get a little traction and you just say, it's not a fit. I don't like it. I want to do something else. You mentioned earlier, like, am I going to have to manage employees? I mean, that's one of those things that it's like the stuff you have to do that isn't the glamorous stuff to get to be really successful.
Yeah.
And so is this a pattern that occurs several times, or how do you proceed after this? You're not super fond of the product procurement anymore.
Yeah. So part of it was I'm spending all night, staying up all night, working with Chinese manufacturers. I'm traveling a ton, back and forth to China, back and forth. I've got young kids, right? I'm missing out on things. And so there's that part of it, right? There's a little bit of like, do I have this work-life balance, which I think is a fallacy, but I'm like, you know, like I'm questioning that at the time, right? And then I'm looking and saying, like, can we really make this a thing? Like my trampoline client, right, as a broker, we might make somewhere between 10 and 15%. Now, if the orders are sizable enough, like then that can sustain the business. But typically, if you're in consumer product goods, right, you have 4, 6, 8, 10, 12x markup on your product. Like, I don't know exactly what like all the costs of running their business are. So I'm not sitting here saying they're printing money and we didn't feel ripped off. We quoted the price, they accepted the price. But the more I'm in this, right, this happens over and over again. I'm like, I want to be on that side. I want to be on that side where like I have the multiples, right? So it isn't so much that I was like, oh, I'm too good for this business, I don't want to do it. But simultaneously, this has been my biggest challenge is simultaneously, I think I need the cash that's coming from this. I've got to have this. but I want to be there.
Mhm.
Right. So I'm going to go start. And so we start sourcing products. We're running Kickstarter campaigns, trying to launch things, right? We start to figure out like maybe we can sell KSL deals. Like there was all these deal sites back in the day, right? Like even Jane, we sold a lot of stuff on all those deal sites, just trying to like, how do we get on the multiple side of consumer product goods? But the bread and butter was always still the service-based side where we are building supply chains, right? At a certain point in time, I was so committed to building product companies, I didn't have time to run it anymore, right? But like,
Sure.
so instead of figuring out like, could I sell this? Do I have the time for it? I'm like, I want my customer to be good. I just introduced my trampoline client straight to the manufacturer. And I'm like, hey, I don't want this to fall through the cracks. You guys have a good thing going. As their business has grown over the last, decade, I'm like, wow. Like, right? Like, but like for me, it wasn't like
Oh man.
my product companies were the hope, right? I'm like, I can get on that scale side of it. But I've got a family the whole time, right? Like, so I don't have the luxury of like sleeping on a couch. Like some entrepreneurial stories that I've read, it's like, I just moved to Silicon Valley and slept on a couch and like just made it work with eating ramen. I'm like, I got kids, I've got a mortgage, I've got responsibilities. No one's fault but my own, but like that was my journey, right? So I'm in this position of like, I need to provide, but I want to be something. I want to create something. I want to build something. And once you've been an entrepreneur for this long, you start wanting that exit, right? Like that's really what became, I'm just like, I'm going to exit. I started a sock company, right? I started like selling things on Amazon and I got these we call them micro brands. At the end of the day, it's just a brand that no one knew what it was. And we positioned it on Amazon of like, hey, there's not a ton of socks that are cool on Amazon that like fit this price point. So we'd go and launch a brand, right? And then we'd pop up a site driving everything to Amazon, right? So like then when the socks start going really well and I've got an investor on this, another investor or another friend comes to me like, dude, you're crushing it with socks. Like, can I get in? And I'm like, well, we don't really need help there, but if you want to put some like seed money and I can start this other micro brand. And so I start doing this like, and again, the pattern isn't so much that I hated the socks, right? Like sometimes it's even my same investor that would get involved in multiple categories. They're like, this is going so well, let me double down and I'll put more money in and go launch this and go launch that. And our revenue went from, 400,000 in year one on selling on Amazon. I'm like, whoa. Like it took me forever. It took me like 3 full years to get to 400K with my service business, right?
Yeah.
Like we're at 400K. We're inching towards just shy of $1 million in year 2. By year 3, we had surpassed 3 million in revenue on Amazon. And I'm like, I'm going to make it, right? And I have investors at this point in each of these little brands. They're all growing. And then Amazon changes the algorithm. They change the policy on how you can gather reviews, right? And so like for me in that sense, I wasn't trying to get out of any of them necessarily, but one of them wasn't enough for me, right? It was like, I got to, like, if one's going well, let me do more. And then once you get spread so thin, like in my case, we had borrowed money, we were leveraged, right? So when our, at 3 point whatever million we were doing that year, I mean, you've got a pretty healthy amount of cash flow coming in that stopped overnight. And I couldn't service debts anymore. And I couldn't like pay my employees. So then I go through the cycle of I got to lay off employees, right? Can we still salvage this? And again, hindsight always comes back and you're like, I should have walked away from that business so much earlier, but I held on. I have an investor that I feel this responsibility towards, right? I have like, that's like my baby, right? I spent like blood, sweat, and tears for 3, 4, 5 years building this. And as it's just falling away from me, I'm doing everything I can to hoard it back, right? And I'm just stretching everything personally. And I'm like, at the end of it, like, I'm going down with the ship, right? Like I left myself no other choice, right? Like potentially if I had been willing to sell earlier before the demise, maybe my investors could have gotten some money back, maybe, right? Like at that point, our revenues had dropped. So it's not like we would have had like this sky high valuation, but we potentially could have salvaged something. We moved a few of the assets to try to get some of our investors' money back, but it was so much all at once that just came crashing down. And I'm like, I mean, that was at a certain point in time, you lose enough people's money and then they like to come after you. And if you don't have money, then, there's not a lot of things that you can do other than, go on the bankruptcy route.
Let me ask you a question about what you were building on Amazon. Did you did you lose focus on what was making money?
Absolutely.
Okay. And is that a result of just going too broad?
I think breadth was the killer then. Not for every business, but Amazon is unique in that, like, you need depth of inventory so that you can play into the algorithm. Never have stock outs, right? So that your score, if you will, grows, your ranking.
Yeah.
And you just keep moving those same ones, right? But we wanted to grow. We're like, hey, like our dress socks are doing well. Let's add athletic socks. Man, we're crushing the men's category. Let's add women's. Wait, we should do matching boys with men's. That would be cool, right? Like, I'm a dad and like I've got, and like, so we just started like when money's coming in.
A lot of SKUs.
Yeah, exactly. When revenue's coming in, like revenue fixes a lot of problems, right? So you're like, like we have some stuff that was slowing down, things that, some SKUs that weren't selling well, but it was minimal compared to like the revenue we were bringing in, not just in socks, but then like I went and did that in, 12 different categories, right? And
that's what I mean. By the way, I have a few pairs of those socks.
Oh,
they're very good. Very good socks. Both the athletic and the dress socks. I should have worn them today. Anyway, so you were in socks, but then you started going in other away from socks, you started building out in other categories and maybe losing focus on what was.
Yeah, the way I looked at it and with my partners, it wasn't that we were a sock company, right? You look at Stance, like Stance very clearly is a sock company. And then because they build this cult-like following, then they can add underwear, they can add hoodies or shorts, whatever they're doing now, right? Because now they have a brand, they have a following. For us, yes, we had a brand name for the socks, but like we were a commodity. Like we were being purchased on Amazon because we had bright colors that fit a price point. Right. That's who was shopping for us. Like very few people were coming saying, I need a Vibe sock. That was our brand, Vibe socks. Like I need Vibe. They were mostly just coming and saying, as good reviews, it's a good price. It's on Amazon. So if there is any problem with the sock, I can return it. Right. So there was all these things in our favor. Right. So for us, as we're looking at it, we're like, we are a machine of like identifying opportunities on Amazon. And then I have a manufacturing background, so I can therefore go and manufacture and source these products. Right. And I can get really good margins and we can go and grow all these different businesses, right? And for a time we were. The challenge, again, looking back, I'm like, I teach classes now at UVU. Omni-channel is like in every textbook that I've ever used, right?
Right.
But at the time, like I'm like, Amazon's so good. Why would we distract ourselves, right? So again, we thought we were being focused. We're focusing on the channel. We're so good at Amazon instead of like, hey, we better have a backup. Like we better have another place that we can sell these. Like let's double down on getting customers to our website. Let's figure that out, right? We made attempts at it, but again, that's not my background, right? Like I'm trying to wear all of these hats.
Sure.
At the end of the day, like there were a few parts of the business that I was good at. And the rest of them, like their blind spots or their, we're not quite big enough to afford someone to do that. So you know what I mean? So like I'm wearing all of these hats. And that's really, I think at the end of the day, what led to the downfall was like some entrepreneurs like see their blind spots earlier. Some have mentors maybe that point them out but no one's good at everything. No one is, but I tried to be, and I tried, and like part of it's ego, right? You're like, I'm doing this. Like,
sure.
I raised all the money. I'm running this. I'm the CEO. Like I hire people that like can do the stuff I don't want to do, but like I'm the visionary, right? Like that's even if you never say those things out loud, that's how I felt.
Right.
And then like, and I think that's part of why I held on so long too, is like, this is mine.
It's your baby.
Built this. I created this.
Hard
right?
to let that go.
Yeah. And like money was good for a while, right? Better money than I'd ever made in my life.
How long were you in that business and how well were you doing financially?
So everything kind of overlaps, right? I mean, you learned that from what we were saying. So like as I'm getting out of the supply chain consulting business, I launched an Amazon agency with a couple buddies to like learn Amazon on someone else's dime. And we were pretty good. Like we hired the right people and we got good. And so all of that's happening at the same time. And then I moved into my own brands and then I sold that service-based entity off to my partner. And so like money was good. Like, we bought a half acre now and we built a brand new custom home and bought a brand new truck, right? I've never been a millionaire. I've never been close, right? But I'm like 30 years old and I'm like I have land and I have a house that like my wife got to design it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And did an amazing job. And like, it was so cool because I'm like, I'm doing this, like I'm providing. There were 2, 3, 4 years of like, we're scraping by in the beginning, right? And we're setting up bounce houses to like make ends meet, right? And we're just doing whatever it takes. And we're slinging,
Yeah.
designer jeans out of our basement on eBay, just doing whatever. And so like, finally I'm like, I did this. Like, I'm so proud of like where I've come. And like, yes, like my wife can be a stay-at-home mom and raise my kids, right? And I'm like, for me, that was just the beginning in my mind, right? I'm thinking, hey, if we're here, if we're 3.2 or whatever million in this year, 2017, 2018, let's even just say like, we no longer keep doubling each year, but let's say we have 25% growth, 50% growth, right? Who knows? I'm like, this business, and in my mind, I'm working towards an exit. Like that's what's happening, right? Like there was never like, hey, what if like Amazon changes things?
Okay, so you had no concept, you have no clue that was coming around. Like, okay,
we did everything according to their policy.
Yeah, well, you're not alone. I mean, that whole change with Amazon, that affected a lot of people in a bad way.
Yeah,
you weren't alone in that. So, I mean, I don't know exactly what to think about that, but there seems to be a little unfairness in that, in how that whole thing went down and evolved.
Yeah, I think that as I was going through everything, anytime I found myself in a state of blame, like wanting to blame Amazon or wanting to blame, why didn't my investor, like, why did he keep giving me money when, like, again, like, I'm thinking all these things, like I never took money from people who didn't have tons of money and experience. And I'm like, well, if you saw me like building something recklessly, why didn't you point it out? Like pull me aside. And I'm like, I was never feeling okay when I tried to push the blame. And so that, like, so again, like I get in these, like now where we're at today, I'm like, oh, I for sure was having panic attacks. I was having these major anxiety, like moments where I'm like breathing accelerated, heart rate accelerated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like flush. And I'm like, I didn't know what was happening. I'm just like, I knew I was stressed, but I'm like, anytime I tried to be like, nah, like he should have done this or she should have done that, I'm like, it didn't work. But I'm like, okay, like clearly there's something that we can learn from everything, right? And like that's a principle that I believe in. And we touched on it very briefly at the beginning. Like I'm a coach now, I'm a teacher now. Like there's things that I want to share with people because I'm like, if I can help share and you can avoid some of these, right? That would be awesome. Then at least like my journey made yours a little less rough, right? And I'm like, and I did learn from it. Now that doesn't mean I'm glad that I went through it, right? But I learned.
Well, I let's dig into that a little bit, the learning portion of it. And nobody wants to put themselves in harm's way. Nobody wants to find themselves struggling with a family and a mortgage and where is the next meal going to come from. And it seems like a story that happens over and over and over again. Not everybody makes it, but people who make it through that seem to be leaders, better people, and people who have something to teach others, and others can maybe benefit from that. I think that's where we are with this. So did you ever I have two questions. Did you ever have an opportunity to sell the sock or any of those businesses while you were in the middle of it?
So we attempted to sell the assets that were remaining, right? It was no longer.
I meant prior to. So while it's up and running and you're doing really well, there was no opportunity to sell. At that point. Okay,
because in my mind, even with revenue of $3+ million, if you were to break that into each of my little brands, right? Like maybe the biggest brand was like, I don't know, 750,000 in revenue, right? One little brand. And so like each of them like together brought like great value. So like my thought would be at some point, maybe sell the whole business, but I'm thinking like, let's go get a big exit, right? Like here's my, hear you. And so like, again, everything that we were building felt scalable, felt repeatable. And so like the idea was if we just hone in on the operations, we can insert fill in the blank product.
Gotcha.
And keep growing.
You had this process in place. Now you just needed to put the right product in there and you had everything else. It was a machine that you could it could be repeat over and over again.
And that's how we're viewing it, right? So,
Yeah.
so again, considering selling something in what felt like its infancy, right, didn't make sense because I'm like, I'm going to build this.
No, I'm
This
going to
will be
get
a
it to
10, 20, 30 million a year and then have a big sale,
Sure.
right?
Did you ever, in this time or anywhere in there, did you ever pass up an opportunity that you look back and think, man, maybe I should have done that thing?
Yeah, probably not like right in the middle of this, like not near like the end of it, right? Because as the business crumbled and went to nothing and we couldn't service the debts, right? For me, I had to sell my house, the one that my wife had designed and built, right? And really tough, and had to sell it. And I was like, look, if I suck at running a business, I'm a failure. I had a really hard time like pulling those two apart, right? The association for me was I'm a failure, not the business failed.
Sure.
I'm a failure, right? So I'm like, I better go to grad school. So we sold our house. We moved to South Carolina, went to grad school, went to Clemson, got an MBA. And
Nice.
Because I thought, look, like if I suck at running a business, like I need to be more employable.
You need to get trained on how to run a business.
I got to have some experience besides just working for myself. I was 10 years at this point, not having had a W-2. So I'm like, for me to go try to get a job now after 10 years, right? Like it felt hard. Like I'm just like, I'd feel like
it felt overwhelming, right?
Yeah. Early in my career, I did have a job with a good friend of mine. He's still friends to this day. Brad Bonham in the Valley sold a company, Walker Edison Furniture. I worked for Walker Edison, and I had an offer to stay. It was an internship technically that I pitched them on. They were hiring a manager, and I said, why don't you pay me a little less than what you're going to pay your manager? Let me be your intern. I'm gonna work my tail off for you, and then like I'll go back to school. So summers between my junior and senior year, right? So they made me.
This is in college.
This is in college. He made me an offer, and he said, why don't you not go back to college? Because you're already good at your job. Come and help us. We had a really successful summer, launched a bunch of products, right? And at the time, like, it was pretty good money. Like, I mean, it was a pretty sizable salary that I was going to get with opportunity to earn some sweat equity if I stayed with the business.
Equity in the business. Oh.
I mean, like, if you know anything about the Walker Edison story, that would have been life-changing amounts of money. Oh, man,
because Walker Edison was acquired. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
How many years after?
So they probably sold, 3 or 4 years ago. So, I mean, it had been a while, right? Brad and I have stayed close. He is an awesome human. My wife and I just kind of laugh, right? I'm like, wow. What if I had I had that job offer, right? All I had to do was keep doing what I was already doing well, right? But again,
it's like, hard to tell in the moment.
Yeah, it really is, right? And I had no idea, and it wasn't a lack of belief or faith in him. Like, frankly, I needed to go get that degree. It was important to my mom, and like my mom's always been important to me, and so I'm like, look, I'm gonna get this degree no matter what. And so I wasn't gonna not go. And sure, there's other options I could have done, online or something, right? But in the moment, I'm like, look, thank you. That's super nice of you. I'm going to go finish my degree and we'll see what happens, right? And then get on my entrepreneurial path and really until everything failed, everything came to a screeching halt. Even when I thought about, God, I could have been making a lot of money, not just in an exit, but as an employee of this company, right? I would have been one of the young employees in its infancy, right? But like, I still believed that what I was building was going to create wealth for me, right? That was going to create like this opportunity for me to quasi-retire and be an angel investor or what. I don't know. I don't even know what I wanted to do, but like, I'm like, I just want to exit my company and then let me decide what I want to spend my time doing.
Okay, so we're at this point now where everything's come crashing down, and you're in a position where you're trying to pay off some debt. You have investors. People are coming after you at this point. How did you get all of that? Like, how did you settle it? How did you get that out from underneath you?
I drug it out for a long time, just telling them like, give me time. Let me see what's my next thing. Like, I can still build something. I can still fix this. I can still do whatever, right? I tried to sell the companies, but they weren't worth anything at that point, right? I tried to do things and it was a good friend of mine that he was just like, look, like, I know it sucks, but like America was founded on, like the opportunity to do things and try to build and be a creator and an innovator. And if and when you fail, like there is a process that you can go through, right? So we literally, like, when I had to look my wife in the eyes and tell her that like the only option I had at this point was to file bankruptcy, like probably the suckiest day of my life, you know? And I'm like, I'm the provider. I'm very few years removed from having been like
The man.
right? and then looking at her and just being like, look, I've done I don't know what else to do. I literally, my phone, it's ringing nonstop, right? And I'm not sharing this for sympathy. Like no one made me do what I did, right? But we were trying to build a business the only way we knew how. And when it came crashing down, like there was nothing that I felt. I tried to turn over every leaf, if you will, right? Looking for what can I do? There was nothing. And at this point, like I have no business, I have no job, right? So like, I'm going to go to grad school and live off some student loans for a little bit and try to figure out like what's next.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's talk about, as you have had time to reflect now on that experience leading up to that filing for bankruptcy. After all of this time now, what are some of the takeaways? What can we share with our listeners? Like, I would do this again, but I would do it this way, or stay away from this, or whatever it is. What are some of those things that you've taken away from that experience?
Yeah, I think for me, I wouldn't borrow any money. I would only take investment where it was for equity. Let's both participate, Some of the debt was investors saying, I'd rather do debt. Let me get my money back sooner in case there's not an exit, right?
Right.
Some of it was me, like, I'm going to keep my equity. Like, I'd rather take debt, right? And so for me, like at the end of the day, there's inherent risk in running a business, right? Like for sure, like in the statistics, depending on who you ask, right? Like 90% of businesses fail within the first 5 years, right? So it's a pretty high probability that you're going to fail. I just think that there are better ways to do it than putting your family at risk, right? Like in putting your livelihood at risk. And then what that would have meant for me isn't that I couldn't have grown the business. We just would have slowed it down, right? Like we would have slowed it down. For me, it was a race to the exit. That was the thing is I'm like, and so maybe if I were to really dissect it, maybe it wasn't the debt that was necessarily the problem. But if I had gone about it in a way, we would have gone with depth, right? Go deeper on our sock inventory instead of breadth. And if I had other people coming to me saying, wow, your socks are selling so well, let me put money in, I probably would have gone back to the table with my other investors and said, hey, look, like, let's split the pie up a little bit more, because at the end of the day, like when this pie is huge, all of us taking a smaller portion, like maybe that
of a really big pie.
Yeah. But at the time it was like, I don't know, like instead of maybe I'll just go and start this new brand and then we can split it however, right? Because it was, again, you believe in yourself. And so some of that is ego and selfishness of like, I want to keep my equity. Some of that is partners not wanting to give up equity, which I don't blame them for either, right? They put their hard-earned dollars into an investment. Like diluting isn't ever ideal, but sometimes it's necessary, right? But for me, if the goal would have been, let's build something sustainable. Let's figure out how this becomes a brand instead of just an Amazon play. There are a lot of things that like if we had slowed down, that it probably could have worked out. But I'm doing it the only way I know how, right? And again, that's not to blame anyone else. I'm just like,
no.
Here, with the experience I have up until now, this is the way I know how to do it. I'm wearing all the hats, and it took me going through losing everything. First of all, to realize that I didn't lose anything that was actually important, right? Because my wife and my kids and that all stays. But losing monetarily, at least everything, right? And starting over, I'm like, then you start to really look into like, what am I good at? What parts of the business that I enjoy? Like if I'm going to, whether it's an entrepreneur or as an employee of a company, if I'm going to find success, like I have to uncover these blind spots and I've got to figure out like, what am I actually good at? Like, what are the things that I can do better than other people?
That's a great lesson. And maybe I think there's a few things in what you said are really important. One, I go back to your childhood. I suffer the same thing a little bit. I feel like I can do lots of different things well, and that leads to becoming disinterested in things maybe too quickly sometimes.
Yeah.
And rather than just continuing to hit singles, I'm going to hit a single over here, but I'm going to go create something else, and I'm going to hit a home run over here. But wait, now I fouled one off.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it feels like that may have been your case as well.
Totally.
You took investors, and rather than being maybe more strategic or more thoughtful about how you took on those investors, you were like, okay, now I have an opportunity to do this thing too.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an amazing lesson. So slowing down, maybe being more thoughtful and strategic, especially with people who want to be part of your business.
Totally.
Yeah. So you kind of work your way through that. How long did that take?
For me to decide to do it, probably a full year of still trying to just
and that's got to be a grind.
Yeah. And again, some people have gone longer, some immediately just decide, some it's an easy decision, right?
You were trying your best to get everybody whole again.
I mean, that's at the end of the day, relationships trump all, in my opinion. Had I done anything dishonest or misleading, I wouldn't have been able to function, right? For me, it was already hard to come to grips with I failed, I'm the failure, right? But for me, I'm I tried everything I could. I tried everything I could to get some sort of money to make whole, but we were so deep in, right? We were so deep. And so I'm once I finally filed, the process actually doesn't take that long once you file, right? You have to do a couple, they do Zoom calls now. And so just went through the formalities, right? And paid the attorney a chunk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you move forward, right? And that's where.
Yeah, you move forward, but moving forward means your credit is racked for several years. And did any relationships suffer as a result of this?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
And is there any path to resolution?
In the back of my mind, I'm still convinced at some point I'm going to figure out the next thing. And absolutely, at that point in time, I have every intention of taking care of those that lost, right? But it's when, I don't know.
Is it losing the business and the financial stability, or the relationships that were damaged as a result of it? Which is the harder loss?
Yeah, that question, the answer is a little bit intertwined in that the relationship with my wife, I felt was damaged because of all these business decisions that I made, right? So the business failing and us leading to filing, right? I let down my wife, which was really, really hard. She's forgiving, and she's been she's had my back through all of the crazy ideas that we've had, right? And she continues to support. But if I can remove her from it or set her to the side, knowing that I definitely hurt that relationship, losing everything and starting over pales in comparison to losing my friends, right? People that I wasn't out raising institutional money, right? I'm raising money from people that trusted me, sure, and close friends, and some understand that we did everything that we could, and others unfortunately don't feel
that was the case.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you're headed off to grad school. You're going to get an MBA. And what happens next?
Yeah, so building a new high school in Eagle Mountain at the time where we live. And I had been a little league coach of all of my kids for, I don't know, 7 years, 8 years.
This
at
is
the time.
basketball?
This is all things little league. I had coached junior jazz,
Soccer,
t-ball,
you name
soccer,
it.
flag
Okay.
football. Like it's
Yeah.
like my oldest boy, when he was 4, signs up for soccer in the city. It happens almost every time the league sends out an email like, hey, we don't have enough volunteers to coach, right? You know how it goes. Like,
Yes, absolutely.
And my wife's like, oh, my husband played soccer. He'll coach. And I'm like,
He can do
wait,
it.
what?
Mhm.
No, snot-nosed kids that aren't mine, like pass. Like I was so not, I'm like,
Yeah.
which is really, if you know my story now, it's really funny that like I was so against, like I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go coach kids. It's like glorified babysitting, right?
Mhm.
I flipping loved it. And I'm like, okay, what sports next? I'm going to sign my kid up. So we get into flag football. And I start building flag football teams. Like we get the same kids every season, and we're practicing like 2 or 3 times a week. More like it was minimum one. We loved it, and so we were all about it. And I'm coaching all the neighborhood kids and everything. And I just found like there was something about sharing my knowledge. I'm a passionate, high energy coach, even for maybe too passionate for little league, right? But these little guys and girls, I'm convincing my buddies to have their daughters come play flag football with us. I'm like, your daughter's so fast. You should have her come play. I can teach her how to. All she has to do is run a jet sweep, fake the handoff, and she's gone, right? And so like I was so involved in watching these kids, and like winning was fun, and we're winning a lot of games and championships in the little leagues, right? And like we like keeping track of score, and when we lose, like I'm sad with them, right? And I'm like, I feel like there's so much to be learned from that, but I'm like we can get better. We'll move on. Like coach is going to figure out what we can do better, and we're going to practice it and rep it, and we're going to win next time. And my kids were so committed to that. But really the thing that I think drove me to wanting to give more of my time to it is I'd get to like season's end, and I would get these texts from moms or dads, and they're like, hey, Johnny has never been so confident in his whole life. Thank you for like taking the time to, help him. And like that was so cool. Like I even have goosebumps right now.
Yeah,
I'm like, I still remember like these things. And these are friends of mine, right? That like we knew each other, we're in the same neighborhood, whatever. And then that extra effort that I'm putting in, right? I'm a big believer in like I get down on my knees or on one knee and I'm eye level with these little kids because I'm like, I just want you to, I'm not towering over you instead. And so a couple little things that I've learned, it was so fun for me. And so like as that's happening, I played a little bit of college basketball, played in high school. And so basketball has been a big part of me. And they're opening up this new high school. And so I'm like, I'm going to apply. I'm like, I'm not a teacher at this time, right? I'm like, I wasn't teaching. And so like, I reached out to the principal, the Alpine School District had announced. I said, hey, I'm way ahead. It's 3 years before the school's going to be done, right? I'm like, I'm overzealous. You'll learn that about me. I'm like, but I just want to know if you're even willing to interview a guy who's not a teacher at the school, because I really want to be your coach. But like, if the answer is no, like, then I'll, what can I do? I'm not going to go get a teaching degree in the,
Yeah.
So that was, and she's like, I just want to hire the best coach. And so I'm like, all right, sweet. So I'm at grad school, right? And this is my plan. And so I'm calling all of my friends back in Eagle Mountain, and I'm like, hey, I'm having a letter, like a self-addressed letter, come to you, an envelope. Will you please write a letter of recommendation from our experience as me coaching your kids? I got 30 letters of recommendation from friends that showed up at this principal's office.
3 years prior to the job opening, or are you?
So now this is like,
now you're right
it's
before.
going to open up in fall.
Oh, okay.
This is like March-ish of the year. It's going to open up in the fall. So I'm living in South Carolina at the time.
So you're at Clemson.
Yep.
You're in an MBA program.
Yeah.
Because you're going to become a high school basketball coach. Is that the story? You're not going to go start your next business.
Yeah.
You're going to, okay.
So I was convinced.
It's getting crazy around here. I almost knocked over the microphone.
I was convinced that I could start my consulting business back up, right? The supply chain one, where I don't have to have capital. I don't have to market anything. I'll just turn it back on. Okay. I'll let everyone know, hey, like I'm back. Let me help you get your stuff done. That's in my mind. I'm like, this will be easy. I can start that. And because I'm going to start that, I'll have time. I can allocate time to be a coach, right?
Gotcha.
And so that was my mindset. I'm like, I can do this. Like I was like not going to start something new, but I was like, I can go back to what I've done before, right? So I decided that I'm gonna be a high school coach. I go and interview for coaching job. In fact, I flew back from South Carolina to interview with them. So I'm interviewing. I get down to the final two. They've told me, they're like, hey, like we've got one other guy that we're meeting with, but he won the 3A Coach of the Year last year. We're leaning towards giving it to him. Like, we haven't decided yet. We really like you, so we want to know, would you be the girls' coach? And I'm like, no.
Did you go like this?
I'm like, oh yeah, I got a flight to catch. I'm like, and she's like, what? I'm like, look, here's the deal. My daughters at the time were 2 and 4. I'm like, I haven't talked to teenage girls since I was a teenager. Like I'm not like, I don't know how to work with them. I don't like, what if they hate me? Right. I'm like, I don't know. Like there were so many concerns. Right. And I'm like, look, like in today's world, you have to be so careful of even things being said about you that aren't true. But when it comes to a male and, underage females, right? So all these concerns are going through my mind, right? So this is still in the interview. And I'm like, I just give him an emphatic no, like I won't. And I said, so if you decide to go with this other guy, like, that's okay. I'll apply for other jobs because I'm convinced that I can get one, right, in my mind.
Sure.
So I fly back. She calls me a week later and she's like, hey, we gave the job to the boys coach.
Yeah.
I'm asking you again, will you apply for the girls coach? And I'd shared with my wife that she had brought that up. And my wife's like, you're an idiot. If you want to coach, why wouldn't you just say yes, right? And she's like, we can put together safeguards, right? And so like anytime a girl texts, I make her put mom or dad on the text chain, right? There's no like nothing. And we never have a one-on-one like, anywhere other than like the side of the court during practice. My coaches will run it. We'll sit like right off the side where everyone can see us. Things that you can do, right? Like I'm very cautious of like making any of the young girls feel uncomfortable, right? Or having perception be that like any behaviors could even be like perceived as inappropriate, right? So my wife's like, we can put all these in place. And if you want to coach, like you should take the dang job that someone's offering you. And so I call him back and the vice principal, the AD, they're on the phone and the vice principal tells me, he's like, Craig, if you coach for 2 years on the girls' side, I promise you, because you're not a teacher, all you need to do is show administration at the high school level that you know how to run a team and you can move to the boys' side. And he's like, it'll be no problem. It happens all the time. And I'm like, sweet. That's what I'm going to do. I can do anything for 2 years, right? I can do this for 2 years. I came home, coached after I graduated, coached the girls in like a fall, whatever, just a fling before the season. And I'm halfway through like the first quarter and I'm like, I'm a girls coach. like, right? I'm like,
you just knew it.
I just knew it. I'm like, I don't know. Like, there's just something.
But you knew.
We're in huddles and I'm like, they're listening. They don't want to fight with me on like, coach doesn't know what he's talking about. Like these girls would run through a wall for you as long as you're kind to them and they know that you care about them, right? And I have grown to love the way that they respond to coaching.
Okay. I told you this hour was going to go so fast. Yeah. I told you, but there's a lot of things that I want to get to in your coaching life now that I think business owners and entrepreneurs will appreciate, especially with all of the experience and insight you gave leading through your business career. Okay. So one is, now you're a consultant. Well, you're business development currently.
Correct.
You teach at UVU.
Correct.
And you're the current head women's basketball coach at Corner Canyon High School.
Yeah, sounds crazy, I know.
It is. It's all crazy. But it fits. Like this fits you. You're a guy that should have several things going on. That's your personality. I mean, I've only known you for how long, and this is what I would say.
Yeah.
That fits your personality.
For better or for worse, right? That's me. So
here are the things that I want to talk about that I think business owners would appreciate when you're coaching. One thing that you said is your high energy. How meaningful is that to all the kids and all the people you're coaching? You're engaged.
Yeah. John Wooden, the old UCLA coach, right? He talked a lot about optimism and positivity, right? And I feel like if you don't believe in something or you don't care about something enough yourself as the leader, then your constituents, right? Like I don't care what business it is. I don't care what department you manage, right? Like if you don't look forward to or at least are optimistic towards what you do,
Mm-hmm.
you get a really hard time leading, right? But like if you're energetic about it, and people can tell when you're fake and when you're genuine and authentic in that energy, right? I don't have to pretend to love basketball. I don't have to pretend to love being a coach, right? Like as long as you're not pretending, they will follow something that you're passionate
But that's
about.
the thing. I believe in alignment in your life and finding the things where you're aligned, where it maybe even almost feels easy. You're aligned.
Yeah.
The first quarter of that game, you knew I'm in. This 100%. Is what I'm going to do. The other thing, so I think that's really important for business leaders, for coaches. You have to be aligned. Your passion has to be aligned with what you're doing, because then you can teach it, you can coach it, and people will be engaged.
Yeah, and it'll get hard, right? And if it gets hard, like, and you're not passionate about it, it's easier to quit. It's easier to fold, right?
Sure.
You're going to fight for it.
Yeah.
Like there are hard things in business. There are hard things in coaching. There are hard things in parenting, like hard things all over the place. But if you love it and you're passionate about it, you're committed to it, right? Then it can be powerful.
You'll figure out a way to do it.
Yeah.
The other thing I really liked what you said when you were coaching little leaguers, but I think this probably applies even now, is either in reality or metaphorically, you get down to eye level. And that's how you communicate with your people. And I think in great organizations, that's what we need to do with people we work with, is you have to get to eye level. How important is that?
Yeah, empathy is severely underrated. Now, there's a lot of literature now and research that's coming out to show how important it is. But when I think of getting on eye level with someone, I think of empathy, right? And I'm an empath by nature. Like some things like you just have, and other things like I'm not organized, right? Like we go on and on about all the things I'm not good at. But I'm an empath by nature. And sometimes that makes you a people pleaser, right? Like I want people to like me, which, can be hard. But at the end of the day, if you're a business leader who cares enough to try to figure out like how is it being viewed from the vantage or the lens of my employee, right? And if you can do that and can do that well, and you prioritize one-on-ones, and when you sit in a one-on-one, you actually ask questions to learn what the answers are instead of just ask questions for the sake of asking questions, right? Like you can be empathetic and you can learn a ton about your team and your employees, right? And I've used a lot of these same principles that I coach with in a business setting as a leader,
Absolutely.
right? And trying to, how do you figure out like what makes you tick? Your personal goals probably aren't to build a business so that Craig can exit, right? That's probably not your personal goal, right? But if I understand what your goal is or what your goals are, then we can find alignment in, hey, you're really good at X or Y or Z. And those things can help with the company goal and Craig's goal or whoever, whatever leader
the team's goal,
about, right?
Whatever it is. Yeah.
Like, but you have to find that alignment, right? Because not everyone's going to naturally align with it, but there are components of it or of your dream or of your personal vision of things that like, if the company, like the company I work for right now, it was a big ask when I was in the interviewing process to say, hey, look, I know this sounds crazy, but I coach high school basketball and it kind of takes a lot of time.
And I'm really passionate about it.
And I love it. And so like, it's a deal breaker. And Russ looks at me and he's like, I can tell how much you love it. We support it. And when we got to the semifinals this year of the 6A state tournament, my boss and two of my colleagues there cheering us on. I'm like, how flipping cool is that? Like I feel supported. Like, I want to coach. I need to coach. It's a part of who I am. I didn't know that. I've learned that later in life, right? But going through all that I've gone through, I'm like, I'm a coach. And if I have an employer, that doesn't help their business directly, right? Like for me to be a coach, like it absolutely does not. But like, because I feel supported, do you think I show up with energy to my job? Absolutely. Right?
No question.
Like, and that's what I mean when you're talking about being an empath, when you're talking about being a leader that gets on their line, right?
Absolutely.
Get down on their eye level. That's what I feel like the company that I work for, B10 Capital, right? That's what I feel like they do. They're doing for me. And I work hard in the endeavors specifically for the job, right? There's a role I have to do.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but you feel that same way as you're the coach, you're supporting, you're finding out what makes your players tick. Same that they're doing for you. They're showing this passion for what you're doing and supporting you. And in turn, you're like, I'm going to give these guys everything I can.
Yeah.
One last question. By the
Okay.
way, this has been so great and so insightful. I think people are going to love this. They're going to get a lot out of it.
It's really nice of you. Thanks.
It's been fantastic. One last thing that you have to do as a coach, and maybe you didn't do as well in your business life, but maybe that's a lesson that you learned that you can pass over to coaching. Strategy is really critical. I'm certain that you don't go into a game and put bottle caps on the floor and say, you line up here, you line up here. That has to be an integral part of how you prepare your team. And that should be an integral part of our daily business life, is you have to be thoughtful about your path and how you're going to get there.
Absolutely. And I think I'll add to that, the role in a basketball team, right, is going to be different for every player. If you become really good at assessing what someone is good at, maybe it's potential. Maybe they haven't even shown that they're good at it yet, but there's potential there, right? You have to see that and you put them in position to find success there. And you get buy-in on that role, right? As an employer, right? As a leader, like if you just treat everyone the same, that won't work. We all have different roles in the business world, right? And so I think that's been one thing with the strategy is I don't come in and say, this is how I do it. I come in and say, look, like I have some philosophies in basketball and some strategies that statistically speaking have a high probability of working.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to come in and assess who I have, right? In an employer's like situation, not that I'm encouraging everyone to go out and fire people, right? But like if you're able to assess like what they're really good at and put them in the right role to find success, right? Like that is something that I think some of the more modern leaders are getting really good at. Seeing potential instead of hiring on only experience, you're hiring on potential, and then putting you in a role that like you can find purpose and fulfillment in this. You're really good at it. We feel good when we do things that we're good at. And then we're on board with letting that thing that we're good at contribute to the greater good of the company, right? But like we have to be in the right role.
No question. And just to wrap this up, I think we could say that the most successful companies and the companies that really grow are the companies where as many people as possible on the team are aligned with the vision and are aligned individually with what they do well.
Absolutely.
Craig, this has been so good. I have goosebumps now. You can't see it because of my nice sweater, but
really nice.
This has been awesome. It's been
Thanks,
fantastic. Frank. And hopefully we'll keep up with you. We'll follow up with you. Best of luck with your coaching.
Thank you.
And I know the season's over now. I can't wait. I'm all fired up. I can't wait to come and see your team play.
Awesome.
Next year, we're in. Craig Morris, there he is. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Know Your Ship podcast presented by eHub. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review.